The story begins with a little snake being gnawed on by a group of piglets. Crunch, munch, chomp. With every bite, the snake's tail twitched. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "Hey! Stop chewing on my tail, you little jerks!" With one swift motion, he coiled around one of the piglets and flung it into the distance, causing the rest of them to scramble away squealing. He glanced at his tail, which was covered with bite marks, and it really started to hurt. Yet strangely, he's still alive, causing him to wonder just what the heck is going on. He vividly remembered a human shattering his demon core, which he depended on for cultivation. Without it, his cultivation path was basically over. Thinking about his ruined future, he burst into tears, believing life was pretty much over for him. But hold on. Something isn't right here. Without his core, he should have died on the spot, but how is he still alive? Well, it's a long story. To get to the bottom of it, let little Snakey walk you through what happened. Or maybe slither you through is more accurate. Anyway, let's rewind a couple of days to a human village. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the rooftops. Villagers bustled around, hurrying to get home. Things felt a little off. Someone was banging a drum on the stairs, shouting for everyone to keep their candles lit and seal their doors and windows tight. "Don't let that old black snake sneak into your house," the man warned. Judging by the villagers' conversations, it became clear that a few days ago, an old black snake had shown up at the mountain god temple and ate 2 people. One of them turned out to be a Taoist priest. While no one had been attacked since then, the villagers noticed their chickens and ducks had been vanishing at an alarming rate. Up on the mountain, a young boy and his father were out collecting herbs. On their way home, the boy suggested they bring their chickens and ducks indoors. He reasoned that even if it stinks, it's better than losing them. The father agreed. He clearly didn't want their livestock turning into snacks for the so-called big bad snake. But just as they finished talking, the father suddenly shivered. "Weird. Why is it so cold all of a sudden?" he muttered. Meanwhile, back at the crumbling temple, a large black snake slithered out of the shadows. Its dark scales practically disappeared into the dim surroundings. This snake, as it turned out, understood human speech and knew exactly who they were talking about. He wondered to himself if perhaps the old black snake they were talking about was referring to him. But honestly, he didn't think he was old, or that scary for that matter. Still, he couldn't deny the villagers had a point. After all, it was he who ate those 2 people by the temple a couple of days ago. But he was just doing them a favor. At least that's what the snake thought. A few days earlier, a desperate man had been running for his life, screaming for help, with an old Taoist priest hot on his heels. Apparently, this priest had been feeding the man all sorts of sketchy herbs and was planning to turn him into some kind of human elixir. The man managed to escape and bolted straight to the mountain god temple. Falling to his knees, he begged the mountain god for help, banging his head on the ground in pure desperation. Nearby, the snake overheard the commotion. Back then, he didn't understand human language, but he could feel the man's fear and pain. Feeling oddly sympathetic, he decided to help the poor guy by putting him out of his misery as quickly as possible. And one gulp later, the man's suffering was over. Before he could slither away, another human appeared and screamed, "No, my elixir!" For some reason, he also looked just as miserable and desperate as the first guy. He even started shouting at the snake, calling him all sorts of nasty names and demanding he spit out his precious human elixir. He didn't understand a word of it. Instead, he thought, well, since he really wanted to meet the previous guys, maybe he should help them reunite. And just like that, down the hatch the priest went. In his stomach, of course. Either way, it was a satisfying dinner. At least back then, he was feeling pretty pleased with himself. What he didn't know was that swallowing those 2 would change his life forever. Not long after, something strange started happening. A demon core began forming inside him, and with it came intelligence. For the first time, he could understand human language and think beyond basic instincts. It felt like his IQ was skyrocketing every second, or perhaps some geniuses were blessing him with some cosmic cheat code for brains. From that moment, the world looked entirely different. He noticed dangers he'd been blissfully ignorant of before, like the terrifying truth about humans. He learned about a group called the Snake Hunters, clad in black cloaks and ruthlessly hunting snakes like him. Turns out, they weren't just your average humans. They were cultivators from a sect specializing in hunting and killing his own kind. He even saw them take down a massive python once. The scene was so horrifying, and he almost jumped to his feet. Not that he had any. That's when he realized just how powerful humans could be. Cultivators, he learned, advanced through stages like chi refining, foundation establishment, core formation, and even the nascent soul stage. Looking back, he realized all his previous escapes had been pure dumb luck, or maybe ignorance combined with sheer recklessness. Now that he was so much smarter, he made a vow. From now on, he'd be extra cautious and do whatever it took to survive. Compared to the high risks of hunting big animals or humans, snatching poultry seemed like the safer route. As he mulled over this plan, his stomach let out a loud growl. Ugh, hungry again. He'd grown so big that a few chickens or ducks didn't cut it anymore. Plus, they were getting harder to steal these days. Then he remembered a rich family nearby. Surely they'd have some pigs. Just as he was about to try his luck, his eyes drifted to a mural on the wall, depicting a human story. Over the past few days, he'd noticed that humans loved naming things. Everyone called him Old Black Snake, which he didn't particularly like. But this mural inspired him. The story it told seemed fitting. It's a love story, and the snake inside is so lovely. So from today onwards, he decided to call himself Snaky. It sounded much cuter, didn't it? The scene then shifts to Chen Village, where everyone has gone to bed for the night. Little Snaky slithered his way toward the pigsty. When he arrived, his eyes gleamed at the sight of plump, snorting piglets inside. One of these would definitely fill him up. Carefully, he checked the human's house. No movement, no light. It seemed they were sound asleep. Perfect. Without hesitation, he darted into the pigsty and swallowed a pig in one gulp. The remaining pigs were clueless at first, but once they realized what had happened, they panicked, squealing and scrambling around in chaos. Little Snaky grew anxious. These noisy pigs are going to wake the humans! His gaze locked onto the loudest one of them all. If you're going to make the most noise, then you're next, he thought. With a flick of his tongue, he swallowed the noisy culprit too. Now his belly was round and full, almost uncomfortably so. Glancing down at himself, he realized he might have overdone it. Still, with several hours left before the humans woke up, he figured he had time for a quick nap to digest. Satisfied and sleepy, he coiled up right there in the pigsty, completely unbothered by the wide, frightened eyes of the remaining pigs. 2 hours later, a commotion jolted Snaky awake. Angry shouts and the sound of scuffling filled the air as a group of men dragged someone toward the pigsty. Realizing he'd gotten too comfortable, Snaky quickly slithered up a wooden pillar, hiding himself on the ceiling. The darkness worked in his favor, and the humans didn't notice him. From his perch, he watched as the men dumped a bloodied, lifeless man into the pigsty. The poor guy had clearly been beaten to death, but neither of them seemed to care. One of them even sneered, "This is what happens if you defy young Master Chu. Useless fools better off as pig feed." The two men, who weren't enjoying the stench of the pigsty, dropped the body and hurried off. As they walked away, one of them scratched his head, glancing back at the pigs. He looked suspicious, like he'd noticed there were fewer pigs than before. Maybe he was just imagining things. Once the coast was clear, Little Snaky cautiously poked his head down to get a closer look. The pigs, curious as ever, had already gathered around the body, sniffing and nudging it. Snaky wasn't sure if the man was truly dead or alive, but he remembered hearing that humans thought corpses brought bad luck. Best to slither away before things get messy. Just as he was about to leave, the man's eyes snapped open. Snaky flinched so hard he nearly fell off the beam. What the hell? How is he alive? The man coughed a couple of times, then started laughing, low at first, but it quickly grew into a triumphant roar. Finally! Finally! I, the immortal Chen Fan, have been reborn through possession. Snaky froze, utterly baffled, and wondered, what on earth is he talking about? The man stood up slowly, testing his limbs, and began stretching. He seemed surprised to know the body he was in was also called Chen Fan. Then, like a madman, he began rambling to himself about things that made no sense to Snaky. Something about breaking off an engagement, a crippled core, revenge, who even knows what else. Little Snaky tilted his head. Who's he talking to? There's no one else here. The man began inspecting his wounds, saying if it weren't for him taking over, this body would have been a goner. But either way, he will restore it soon enough. Meanwhile, Snaky clung tightly to the beam, hoping to stay unnoticed. But of course, the worst happened. The man turned and locked eyes with Snaky. For a moment, Snaky panicked. His mouth opened wide in shock. The man said he was immortal, but what does that even mean? Is he a human cultivator? To his surprise, the man didn't scream, run, or even flinch. Instead, he just sat down cross-legged, completely unfazed, like having a giant snake glaring at him was the most normal thing in the world. Then, in the most casual tone, the man said Snakey was just a spirit-level beast at the first level of enlightenment, which is not even worth his attention. The man ignored Snakey completely and began meditating. Soon, a faint golden glow surrounded him, and above his head, a mystical image of a dragon coiled around a cauldron appeared. His face lit up with excitement, overjoyed to see the demon god cauldron had followed him into his rebirth. Snakey, on the other hand, had no clue what was happening. All he saw was the man conjuring some strange energy, which could only mean one thing in his mind. He was about to be killed. He must have figured out I stole the pigs, and now he's going to punish me. The moment Snakey pictured himself skewered and roasted over an open flame, tears welled up in his eyes. Panicking, Snakey knew he didn't want to die here. What do I do? Give the pigs back? He glanced at his bloated belly. Too late for that. Most of them had already been digested. As the man's aura grew stronger, Snakey's panic deepened. He muttered to himself over and over, "What do I do? What do I do?" Finally, as the man boldly declared, "In this life, I will crush the entire world beneath my feet." Snakey made his decision. Without thinking, he opened his mouth wide and swallowed the man whole in one swift gulp. The man barely had time to grunt in surprise before disappearing down Snakey's throat. For a brief moment, Snakey felt triumphant. But he didn't get ahead of himself, knowing the noise had likely alerted the humans. He needed to get out of there, fast. Meanwhile, inside Snakey's stomach, Chen Fan was absolutely livid. Getting swallowed by a mere level 1 demonic beast made him feel humiliated. As he spoke, Chen Fan braced himself against the esophagus and began gathering energy. Snakey's victory was short-lived. A sudden, brutal strike from inside made him howl in pain. He couldn't believe the man was still alive, and how he was able to cast spells from inside him. Chen Fan didn't let up, launching a relentless barrage of attacks. Each blow sent shockwaves of agony through Snakey's body, making him writhe and scream in torment. Realizing he was in serious trouble, Snakey decided to activate his trump card, which is his demon core. But just as he was about to use it to protect himself, the man acted faster. He pushed inside Snakey's body and found the core before Snakey could react. Snakey whimpered, "Don't touch it, please don't touch it." But it was too late. Chen Fan's fingers wrapped around the core, and with one powerful yank, he shattered it into pieces. Pain like nothing Snakey had ever experienced ripped through him. He spat up blood, his body crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. "Ouchie! My demon core! It's gone!" Snakey's vision blurred with tears. Damn, snake hunters are too strong. His body was a wreck, his jaw impaled on a sharp tree branch, leaving him unable to move. He thought bitterly about how unfair it was, since he just gained intelligence and his life just barely getting started. Tears streamed from his eyes. If he'd known it would end like this, he'd never have stolen those piglets. Never. Inside Snakey's body, Chen Fan continued attacking him, even biting chunks of Snakey's flesh to replenish his blood energy. He mocked Snakey for being weak and fragile, but admitted he'd at least make a decent tonic. Just as it seemed Snakey's fate was sealed, something unexpected happened. Besides the crushed demon core, the demon god cauldron began to glow. Somehow, it broke free from Chen Fan's control. Chen Fan reached out desperately to reclaim it, but no matter how hard he tried, the cauldron drifted further away. It floated towards Snakey's shattered demon core, pulsing with golden light. Then, with a brilliant flash, the cauldron absorbed the remains of the core. Then, a massive golden image of a dragon materialized. Chen Fan froze, his expression shifting from disbelief to sheer terror. Why? Why would the cauldron help this snake? Could it be... This isn't an ordinary snake demon? But he will never get his answer. The golden dragon opened its mouth and unleashed an overwhelming surge of energy, obliterating him in an instant, leaving nothing but ashes. The explosion wasn't kind to little Snakey either. The immense energy coursed through his body, shattering him into several pieces. Just before everything went dark, all he heard was the humans screaming about how this wasn't supposed to happen. He was immortal. As the sun set, the chaos subsided. Little Snakey's battered body began to regenerate. Apart from a few terrified piglets nearby, the area grew quiet. Pain throbbed through him as he slowly regained consciousness. Ow, this hurts so much, he thought, tears streaming down his face. His body was exhausted and his strength drained, and he muttered bitterly how everything is gone. What he didn't notice was a faint reflection of a dragon shimmering in the water next to him. Back to where we started, Those little piglets, perhaps out for revenge, had been gnawing on his tail after he'd eaten one of their own. After getting rid of the pigs, Snaky noticed something strange. He was still alive, even though his demon core was gone. Where his core had once been, a faintly glowing cauldron now pulsed with energy. It didn't take long for Snaky to realize the cauldron had somehow replaced his demon core. Stranger still, he could now sense his surroundings and even see inside his own body. Is this what human cultivators call spiritual sense? He wondered, thrilled by the discovery. With this ability, he could perceive everything around him, even with his eyes closed. There was more. His mind was suddenly flooded with knowledge, memories of techniques from the human he'd swallowed earlier. Curling up, Snaky decided to test his luck, trying one of the techniques in hopes it might heal him, like it had healed the human. He repeated the strange phrases the man had muttered, and to his amazement, the cauldron inside him began to activate. Warm energy spread through his body, radiating outward. Nearby plants bloomed, and his injuries started healing. His body glowed softly as wounds closed, and his once crippled tail looked as good as new. Within moments, he was completely revitalized. So this technique boosts cultivation, with healing as a bonus? Snaky marveled at the possibilities. He wasn't sure if the cauldron had fully replaced his core, but for now, he was alive, and that was enough. Feeling stronger, he decided it was time to leave this place and find a safer place to recover. At the same time, he realized that if a mere human boy was this strong, he definitely couldn't go around provoking humans anymore. But not before filling his belly. The clueless pigs were still lingering nearby, and Snaky figured survival was easier on a full stomach. Over the next few days, Snaky found a clear river and settled there. Using a bunny he'd caught earlier, he scrubbed himself clean, enjoying a rare moment of peace. His mind had been flooded with new knowledge. He learned that demon beasts, like humans, also cultivated in stages. For demon beasts, it started at the enlightenment stage where they gained intelligence. Snaky realized he was at the peak of the first level of enlightenment, equivalent to the peak of the human chi refinement stage. But every night, he dreamed of ancient mythical beasts shattering the heavens and splitting the earth. These visions sparked a fierce ambition within him. He wanted to become just as powerful. However, he also knew that if he wanted to avoid being skinned and roasted by humans, he'd need to focus on cultivation. So Snaky threw himself into mastering the mysterious technique he'd learned from the human. It not only made him stronger, but also improved his physical constitution. After each session, he expelled impurities from his body. Once, he even shed his skin, which left him feeling oddly rejuvenated. A week later, Snaky noticed subtle changes in his body. Tiny horns on his head had grown longer. His scales were shinier and harder, however. The downside of all this is that he became much smaller, shrinking to mere 6 feet in length. While his reduced size made him less intimidating even to small birds, like this one, for example, who now treated him like a harmless snack, Snaky didn't mind too much. The birds, after all, made for a quick and easy lunch. Though smaller, his speed and strength had increased significantly. His body had become more agile, allowing him to take down larger prey with ease. Best of all, his new size didn't stop him from swallowing big meals, which was what really mattered. By now, Snaky was sure of one thing. The cauldron inside him had indeed replaced his demon core. He realized that once the cauldron was filled, it would trigger his breakthrough to the next stage. However, hardcore cultivation came with a hefty energy cost. Absorbing spiritual energy from the surrounding helped, but he also needed a boost of blood energy, and that can only come from food. One evening, while slithering through a watermelon field, Snaky spotted a wild boar grazing nearby. Wild boars were large, ferocious beasts, but this one looked, well, kinda stupid. It didn't seem to have any intelligence, which meant it had to be weaker than Snaky. Feeling confident, he began creeping closer, clutching a few sharp stones tightly in his tail and mouth. He moved stealthily through the grass, smooth and silent. This'll be easy, he thought, or so he believed. Suddenly, the boar whipped its head around, locking eyes with him. Caught red-handed, little Snaky awkwardly set the stones down and tried to play it cool. So are these watermelons ripe? He asked sheepishly. The boar answered with an angry snort and a deafening roar before charging straight at him. Panicked, Snaky turned tail and bolted. Oh no, oh no, oh no! His heart raced as the boar barreled after him, but as he fled, he realized the path ahead was a dead end. He couldn't run forever. If he wanted to survive, he'd have to fight. Determined, Snaky scooped up the stones again, coiled his tail tightly, and flung them at the charging boar with all his strength. He wasn't aiming to kill, just injure it enough to buy himself time to escape. What happened next left him stunned. Each of the 4 stones he hurled hit with such force that they punched clean through the boar's massive body. The creature let out a final guttural cry before collapsing to the ground. Snakey stared in shock. For a moment he felt a flicker of pride. Am I actually this strong now? But ever cautious, he wasn't convinced. The boar could be faking it. Not one to take chances, he grabbed the leftover stones and hurled them at the lifeless body, just to be sure. After throwing all of the nearby stones, he let out a long sigh of relief. Okay, now it's definitely dead. He then cautiously approached the boar. Even so, his nerves were still on edge. That was way too close, he thought, trembling slightly. If I'd made even one mistake, that thing could have turned me into dinner. Still, Snakey knew better than to let his guard down. Even though the boar was clearly dead, he decided to take extra precautions. Using his tail and sharp fangs, he tore the boar into smaller pieces, just in case it somehow sprang back to life. Only when he was satisfied did he grab a boar leg and begin to eat in peace. He commented between bites saying the boar's meat is tougher than those farm pigs. But he liked it, chewy, with a wild, gamey flavor. As he chomped away, something hard jabbed his teeth. Curious, he spat it out and examined it. It was a huge demon core. A chill ran down his scales. So this boar was a demon beast after all. Snakey froze, remembering what he'd learned recently. Demon cores were brimming with untamed energy, and swallowing one raw could cause your body to explode from the inside out. The proper way to handle it was to refine the core into a pill or elixir first. But Snakey doesn't know how to do that. Then a thought struck him. But wild demon beasts don't refine cores, do they? They just swallow them whole. If eating cores was that dangerous, wouldn't demon beasts have gone extinct by now? He realized his knowledge came from a human perspective, and Snakey was clearly built differently. Licking his lips, Snakey decided to take the risk. He tossed the core into his mouth, struggling as its size made swallowing difficult. With one big gulp, he forced it down. Almost instantly, a surge of energy radiated from his stomach. His belly glowed faintly, growing warm and almost uncomfortably hot. Nervously, Snakey peeked inside with his spiritual sense and saw the cauldron in his body absorbing and purifying the core's energy. Relief washed over him as the purified energy spread through his body, filling him with power. Suddenly, a powerful surge erupted within him, and he felt his cultivation break through to the 2nd level. Excited, Snakey noticed immediate changes. 2 scales on his tail shimmered with a golden hue, and their hardness visibly increased. Curious, he flicked his tail at a nearby rock. To his amazement, the impact left a deep crack. "Whoa, I'm so much stronger now!" Snakey exclaimed, tail wagging in excitement. But his joy was short-lived. A faint rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. He froze, his eyes darting toward the noise. Emerging from the shadows was a human boy, gripping a pitchfork and glaring at him intently. A tense standoff unfolded. The boy gripped his pitchfork tightly, wondering if this old black snake was going to eat him. Meanwhile, little Snakey stared back, heart pounding, wondering if this boy was a cultivator. Could he be another Chen fan? Just as Snakey was spiraling into panic, the boy made the first move, charging forward and thrusting the pitchfork straight at him. Oh no, not again! Snakey's reflexes kicked in. With a swift flick of his tail, he shattered the pitchfork into splinters, not even stopping to look at the boy's stunned face. Without hesitation, he turned and bolted into the bushes. The boy watched the snake disappear into the distance, then ran home screaming to his father about how the old black snake had killed the demon boar that had murdered his mother, but somehow hadn't hurt him. Snakey, meanwhile, didn't stop running until he was sure no one was following him. Finally, as he climbed a set of stone stairs, he kept glancing back nervously. Was that kid just a normal human? Then, like a rock hitting him in the face, the realization dawned on him. He was developing a full-blown human phobia. Frustrated, he muttered to himself, calling himself a coward. How is he supposed to become a legendary beast if he keeps running like this? Determined to toughen up, Snakey made his way to the mountain's peak. Standing in front of the old mountain god temple, he looked up thoughtfully. Maybe humans are onto something with this praying business. If this is where he gained intelligence, it must be a lucky spot for him, right? To show his sincerity, he picked up 3 sticks to use as incense. But just as he was about to bow, a delicious smell wafted through the air. There, In front of the mountain god statue was a spread of offerings. His stomach growled loudly. Well, it'd be a shame to let this go to waste. Even the mountain god wouldn't want that, right? With that flawless justification, Snaky helped himself to the offerings, devouring everything in sight. Once satisfied and full, he let out a loud burp before arranging the incense sticks in front of the statue. He bowed earnestly, murmuring his prayer. Dear mountain god, please help me overcome my inner demons, train successfully, and live a long life without humans trying to kill me. Thanks in advance. Just as he finished, a human voice suddenly broke the silence behind him. Snaky froze. Not again. Why are humans always showing up? He quickly slithered behind the statue, peeking out to see a human girl stumble into the temple. She was being chased by several men. This girl's not very smart, thought Snaky. Why would she run into a dead end? There's only one exit here. Unfortunately, that also meant escaping unnoticed wasn't an option for him either. Using his spiritual sense, he scanned the situation and spotted a man strutting toward the girl. Her hands trembled as she held a small dagger to her neck, her voice quivering as she threatened to end her life if he came closer. Even if she can't kill him, at least he won't get anything in return, she hissed. The man smirked, completely unfazed. When Snaky heard the man call himself Young Master Chu, a memory clicked. Wait, isn't this the guy who almost beat Chen Fan to death? A chill ran down Snaky's scales. If this guy could nearly kill Chen Fan, he must be terrifyingly strong. Chu moved quickly, disarming the girl with ease. Her dagger clattered to the floor as he clamped a hand over her mouth. Humans. Always so dramatic, Snaky thought, tilting his head. But then he noticed Chu wasn't just being threatening, he was acting weird. Oh no. Snaky's tail twitched in irritation. Is this guy in heat? Snaky found humans incredibly strange. Unlike snakes, who had a proper mating season in the spring, humans seemed to do this anytime they wanted. He couldn't understand why anyone would bother with such fragile creatures anyway. That girl wouldn't last a minute in the mountains. As Chu pushed the girl to the ground, he picked up her dagger and began taunting her. The girl's eyes burned with fury as she spat out, accusing Chu of forcing her to break off her engagement, killing her fiancé Chen Fan, and now trying to humiliate her. If I die, even as a ghost, I'll haunt you for the rest of your miserable life, she screamed. Snaky munched on an apple from the offerings, watching with mild curiosity. Humans are so weird. Why do they make everything so complicated? At that moment, the long-neglected mountain god statue betrayed him. Its arm, weakened by time, suddenly broke off and crashed to the floor. Both the girl and Chu froze, snapping their heads toward the noise. The girl's eyes widened in astonishment, believing the mountain god is here to save her. She leaped to her feet and rushed toward the statue. Chu, however, wasn't so easily convinced. Who's there? Come out now, he demanded. The girl began praying desperately, but when she glanced up, her heart nearly stopped. A 6-foot-long black snake was coiled around the mountain god statue, staring straight at her. Little Snaky, mid-bite on his apple, froze. The nearly finished fruit slipped from his mouth, bouncing onto the ground. At that moment, he knew he'd done goofed. The girl screamed and spun around to flee. In her panic, she ran straight into a dagger, which Chu instinctively raised at the sound of her scream. The blade pierced her and she collapsed to the ground, blood pooling beneath her. Chio's face twisted in shock. No, what have I done? He shouted, staring at her lifeless body. Hearing the commotion, Chu's lackeys burst into the temple, their eyes darting around asking what happened. Chu, trying to regain composure, tells them there's something in here and orders them to find it. Snaky's panic intensified as Chu added how he's an outer disciple of the Snake Hunter sect and no demon beast can escape out of his hands. Snake Hunter sect? Oh no, I'm in serious trouble. Chu pointed at the mountain god statue and ordered them to check behind it. The lackeys began poking and prodding, tapping the statue and surrounding areas to flush Snaky out. The sound of wood and stone being struck echoed through the temple, making Snaky's scales itch with anxiety. They're going to kill me! I can't just sit here and wait to die. Summoning every ounce of courage, Snaky decided to strike first. He burst from his hiding spot, sending the nearest lackey sprawling onto his backside with a terrified scream. Chu sneered at the sight, saying, "It's just a 6-foot snake demon." He scoffed, telling the two to give him a moment to gather his energy, and he will end this creature with one strike, followed up by saying Snaky's corpse will make a perfect tribute to the Snake Hunter sect. The lackey got back to his feet, then grabbed wooden sticks and charged at Snaky. Snaky quickly assessed the situation. That Chew guy is definitely the strongest. If he doesn't take out these two quickly, he won't stand a chance. With a decisive lash of his tail, Snaky slammed into the lackeys with all his strength. The air cracked like a whip as his golden-scaled tail tore through them, reducing their bodies to pulp in an instant. Snaky froze, staring wide-eyed at the carnage. Wait, that's it? They were this weak? Chio's concentration shattered at the sight of his lackey's remains, and the energy he'd been gathering dispersed. Trembling violently, he stumbled back, muttering in disbelief. What kind of creature is this? Without hesitation, Chio turned and bolted for the temple door, shouting over his shoulder that the snake hunter sect wouldn't let Snaky live, and his master will turn him into an elixir. Snaky knew he couldn't let Chew escape. If he brings his master here, he's dead for sure. Summoning all his speed, Snaky chased after the fleeing human and delivered a brutal strike on Chew's skull. With a deep sigh of relief, he dragged the body back to the mountain god temple. That was close, he thought, his heart still pounding. If he'd managed to gather his energy, he wouldn't have stood a chance. But then he glanced nervously at the mountain god statue. Wait, could this have happened because he ate the mountain god's offerings? A cold shiver ran down his scales. If the mountain god's mad, he's doomed. Thinking quickly, Snaky piled the 3 bodies together on the offering table, grabbed 3 more branches to use as incense sticks, and bowed deeply. Mighty mountain god, please don't be mad. I've brought you 3 humans as offerings to make up for what I ate. After a moment of prayer, an idea struck him. Maybe this was the mountain god's way of testing him, a trial to teach him to stop hiding all the time. In his mind, he could almost hear the mountain god reassuring him, "You're destined to become the strongest serpent in the demon beast realm." With newfound purpose, Snaky vowed to double down on his cultivation and return to the forest to train. A week later, despite relentless efforts, Snaky's progress had been slow. The cauldron in his body was only halfway full, and the small animals he'd been eating weren't helping much. Frustrated and hungry, he longed for another demon boar like the one he'd eaten before. So he slithered back to the watermelon field, even trying to set up a trap. But his crude attempt failed to catch anything, not even a bird. Days passed with no sign of large prey. His stomach growled constantly, and the juicy watermelons in the field were becoming increasingly tempting. If wild boars like watermelons so much, maybe I'll try one, he thought. Just as he was about to take a bite, he spotted 2 humans walking by the river. A father and son were heading toward the field, chatting casually. To Snaky's dismay, the boy was the same one who'd wielded the pitchfork before. The boy was talking excitedly about the rising river and how they'd caught plenty of fish, while the man next to him carried a basket full of their catch. As the father and son got back to their home at the edge of the field, the boy suddenly stopped and glanced at the watermelon field. Despite the distance, it felt like the boy could see him. Little Snaky froze in panic. The boy shouted something and began running toward the field, carrying the basket of fish. Little Snaky scrambled up a nearby tree, doing his best to blend in with the branches. When the boy reached the base of the tree, he placed the basket on the ground and ran off, shouting over his shoulder, saying these fish are his way of saying thank you and tells him to come down and eat it. Little Snaky blinked in confusion, watched the boy run away, and then stared at the basket. Did he just offer me fish? Drool began to drip from his mouth as he cautiously slithered down the tree. Hunger gnawed at him, but so did suspicion. He needed to be more cautious, he wondered. Is this a trap? Could the fish be poisoned? He eyed the fresh, plump fish flopping in the basket. Their energetic movements reassured him a little. Maybe just one won't hurt, he thought. He tentatively swallowed the first fish, then waited. When nothing strange happened, he ate another, and another. Soon, he couldn't stop. Meanwhile, the boy was walking home, occasionally glancing back. Old Black Snake really seems to enjoy fish, he thought. Suddenly, a man stepped in his path, blocking his way. He asked if the boy had seen a black snake nearby. The boy's eyes fell on the badge at the man's waist, engraved with the word, snake. A chill ran down his spine. The man was from the snake hunting sect. Getting no response, the man barked impatiently. The boy hesitated, stammering, saying he hadn't seen any snake around here. Another hunter standing nearby scoffed, saying the kid was just a brat. What's the point of asking him anything? At that moment, a loud noise echoed from the mountain, startling nearby birds. The 2 snake hunters exchanged glances, then shoved the boy aside and ran toward the sound. The boy silently prayed, "Old Black Snake, run away quickly and don't get caught." At the same time, someone near the river shouted how the old black snake had once again eaten another person. Back to little Snaky, our boy wasn't having the best time. While devouring the fish, he'd accidentally broken 2 bird eggs, earning a pair of painful lumps on his head from the furious parents. Worse still, he almost got discovered by the snake hunters. He'd heard the scream from the mountain too, but he was confused. What do they mean by eating humans? He was just eating fish. The boy's earlier actions puzzled him even more. Why did the boy lie to protect him? Shaking his head, Snaky muttered, "Humans are too complicated." Deciding the mountain was no longer safe, he slithered toward the river, planning to cross it. Maybe the other side will be safe for a few months, he thought. As he slipped into the water, another worry struck him. There are only 3 months left until winter, and he hasn't started storing food yet. Looks like his cultivation's going to be delayed. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared in the water. Snaky looked up, startled. It was a giant swamp eel. Its movements resembled a snake's, and scars covered its body. Snaky's eyes narrowed as he realized something. This eel, it's the one that ate a human and framed him. Judging by its injuries, it must have barely escaped a fight with the snake hunters. The swamp eel didn't seem to notice Snaky at first. It was too busy devouring the fish nearby, swallowing them one by one, not even leaving the bones and all. When the eel saw him, Snaky knew it's fair game, and perhaps he could make the eel his meal too. He briefly considered. But then he dismissed the thought. If the eel managed to escape the powerful snake hunters, it must be powerful too. Better to stay alive than test his luck. Unfortunately, the eel spotted him. Its enormous mouth opened wide as it lunged at him. Snaky darted aside, narrowly avoiding the attack, causing the eel to smash into nearby rocks, sending debris flying. This isn't good, Snaky thought. He was running out of breath, and the eel wasn't giving up. Realizing he had no other choice, he decided to gamble everything on one desperate attack. He darted forward, slamming his head into the eel's abdomen while biting down hard. But as soon as he bit into the flesh, his stomach churned and he spat it out. Disgusting. The flesh had a foul, acrid taste, and it burned. To his shock, the water around them began to boil and erupt into flames. What's happening? Is this an illusion? Snaky remembered something from Chen Fan's cultivation technique. In any illusion, the first step is to control your breathing and calm your mind. Closing his eyes, Snaky began circulating his cultivation technique. A golden dragon materialized from within, surging outward and shattering the fiery illusion. Yes, I broke free, Snaky thought triumphantly, but his victory was short-lived. The swamp eel's massive jaws lunged at him again. With no time to dodge, Snaky instinctively coiled into a tight ball and lashed out with his tail. His golden-tipped tail struck with incredible force, slicing cleanly through the eel's body. Snaky stared at the severed eel in disbelief. Did I just cut it in half? Looking at his tail, he marveled at his strength. If just 2 golden scales are this powerful, imagine my whole body covered in them. But he quickly brushed aside his excitement. This fight was mostly luck. The eel was already injured and practically threw itself onto his tail. To be safe, Snaky chopped the eel into smaller pieces and tied them together with vines. Dragging the hefty load to the riverbank, he inspected his haul. The meat and demon core would sustain him for months, maybe even help him break through to the next level of cultivation. As he cleaned his spoils, a wooden badge fell from the eel's stomach. It was engraved with the word, snake. A chill ran down Snaky's spine. This eel ate a snake hunter? For a moment, Snaky felt a pang of respect for his defeated foe. Bowing slightly toward the remains, he murmured, "Brother Eel, you were a true hero, fighting the snake hunters for our snakes. But since you tried to eat me, I had no choice. Don't worry. I'll make sure none of your meat goes to waste. Your sacrifice won't be in vain." He swallowed the demon core in one gulp. It was larger than the last, lodging in his throat for a moment before he forced it down. With the meat tied securely, he slithered off into the forest. Back by the riverbank, the 2 snake hunters stumbled upon the severed head of the swamp eel. Examining the sharp teeth and torn fragments of their sect robes caught in its mouth, they cursed under their breath. "Damn," one muttered. They figured that they'd chased the wrong thing, and it was the old black snake that killed this demon eel. The senior snake hunter nodded but hesitated, glancing nervously at the towering trees around them. They thought of keep chasing, but this is Iron Bear Mountain after all. And there's that demon bear said to be at the peak of the 3rd level enlightenment. If they run into it, they're skewered for sure. The junior brother frowned, scratching his chin thoughtfully. He said how he heard something interesting about that old black snake recently. Apparently, the snake ate an alchemist and his human elixir. He believed the elixir's effects must still be lingering in the snake's body. If they managed to hunt it down, that elixir could help his senior brother break through to the 4th level. He leaned closer, saying how his senior brother had been stuck at the 3rd level for years. The senior brother stroked his chin, deep in thought. The idea was tempting, too tempting, but he shook his head slowly. Even so, going into this mountain now is too risky. That demon bear is no joke. If they're not careful, they will be its next meal. The junior grinned slyly, saying if that was the case, then they would just wait. In a few months, when the heavy snow comes, that bear demon will hibernate, and so will the snake. That's when they strike. Then they can track down old Black Snake and kill it. Meanwhile, little Snakey had found a cozy cave deep in the mountains. It was dark and dry, with old bones scattered across the floor from some unknown predator's past meals. Snakey carefully hung his bundles of eel meat from a protruding rock, ensuring they were out of reach of scavengers. With his spoils secure, he curled himself together into a comfortable position on top of the pile of bones, letting out a satisfied sigh. This spot's perfect, he thought. Food, shelter, and, most importantly, no humans in sight.